The Murder Lord demands a better offering. Something new, sticky, sweet, and delicious. He wants you.
Fear is a powerful emotion. That unsettling sensation of being watched, being tracked, being hunted by someone or something with ill intentions is the type of feeling that brings all of us right back to our most basic survival instincts. An anticipatory feeling of imminent danger, of dread, of violence, or even of death. Orin the Red of Baldur's Gate 3 is a video game villain that brazenly and flamboyantly explores what it really means to instill that brand of fear in the player. An antagonist that is as sadistic, chaotic, and terrifying as she is deeply evil. Well, villainy at large in Baldur's Gate 3 is a little bit on the unorthodox side, because instead of having a single obvious bad guy from the opening credits to the very end like the original two games in this series, BG3 opts for this very interesting kind of diverse tapestry of evil. Various villains, big and small, that keep the overall narrative of this game cryptic and tangled as you progress through it, leaving you constantly questioning who is really doing what, where, and why. But I would say that at the core of that structure lies three main baddies, an enigmatic trio of characters known simply as the Chosen Three. A team of villains that come together as unlikely allies in service of their respective gods as they attempt to conquer the Sword Coast and beyond. And they are General Ketheric Thorm, Lord Enver Gortash, and of course the unforgettable Orin the Red. And while all of these Chosen Three are pretty well written and presented villains in their own right, I would say with relative confidence that Orin here is the most evil, the most violent, the most unhinged, and for my money, the most intimidating of those three. Because what she wants as a villain is simple: to kill, to spill untold amounts of blood in the name of her god Bhaal, to play her part in the Chosen Three's plot in her own kind of unique, quirky way as this trio attempts to bring death to the world. But listen, what we have here is far more than a crazy lady with a knife. This is a granddaughter of divinity, an unstoppable serial killer, a changeling, a product of grotesque incest, and simply put, one of the most singularly dangerous and unpredictable individuals to ever wander the Dungeons & Dragons setting of the Forgotten Realms. Now, a little disclaimer here at the beginning, this video is very much meant to be part 2 to my previous upload on Ketheric Thorm, so I definitely encourage you to start there if you want the full scope of how the Chosen Three work in this game in the sequence that we typically encounter them in. At any rate, welcome everyone to the Villainpedia, a video series where we take long hard looks at the most evil characters in the medium of video games to try to find out what makes them tick. Now I have to warn you, this video has major spoilers for Baldur's Gate 3, and especially for the origin character track known as the Dark Urge. So, if you want to preserve that experience for yourself, definitely come back later. I am Ghost, your host as always. A quick, sincere thank you to all of my wonderful patrons who helped me out by supporting away from YouTube. And without further ado, join me now as we unravel the murderous mystery of the one, the only, Orin the Red. Now, I think to understand this specific villain, where she came from and why she is, well, the way she is in-game, we really need to understand a bit more about her previously mentioned god, Bhaal, the Lord of Murder, the patron deity of violence and ritualistic killings. Well, as you very likely know, the Baldur's Gate series, going way back to its original two games, has always had its narrative constructed completely around the plots and dealings of Bhaal. He's kind of acted as the super overarching antagonist of this entire franchise to this point. But even more specifically, it's been Bhaal's children, his mortal offspring that are known very funnily as the Bhaal spawn that have driven the story bus for so long. Extremely powerful, influential people of all different races all over the world. Bhaal spawn are typically blessed with some sort of strange, unique powers and carry a degree of a sadistic streak. You know, an innate intrusive desire to cause chaos, to dominate, and of course, to kill. Well, Sarevok Anchev, the main villain of the original Baldur's Gate, who I made a lengthy video on just last winter, is perhaps the most famous Bhaal spawn character in the Forgotten Realms, and a very key character when we are talking about Orin the Red. A man who during his run as an antagonist was attempting to take over the entire Sword Coast, start this big war, butcher as many people as possible, and ascend as the new god of violence himself. Very, very evil fella, but thankfully, way back in the day, we were there to save the day, and Sarevok was stopped. However, I will say if you want to learn everything about his backstory, which includes the origins of Bhaal, the Bhaal spawn prophecy in its entirety, and my opinions about him being present in Baldur's Gate 3, please do go check out that video right after this one. I think it's stuffed to the brim with extremely relevant information because Orin and Sarevok share a very intimate connection. In fact, believe it or not, Sarevok is Orin's father, as well as her grandfather, and her mother was, in life, also her half-sister, which sounds strange because it is, so allow me to explain in great detail. Incest. It seems that in the years between Baldur's Gate 2 and 3, this defeated villain of the past kind of wormed his way back into Baldur's Gate, into the lower city, and founded a brand new secret underground cult, worshipping his divine father. And while recruiting and amassing followers to grow this cult, let's just say he was not shy about populating the ranks himself. Now, the full Anchev family tree is thankfully unknown, and I'm sure it's a mess, but we do know that he at some point had a daughter here named Helena, who of course became a part of this cult herself. And then he decided, in this effort to keep an extremely potent Bhaal bloodline intact, to then mate with his own daughter, a union which resulted in our villain, Orin the Red. Now, I think we all know as humans that inbreeding in this way can lead to a whole host of issues, right? Developmental, physical, mental, and many other problems arise when gene pools remain this shallow. But let me tell you, Sarevok didn't seem to mind. That was actually the point. This child was meant to be his ultimate offering to the Lord of Murder. Pure-blooded Bhaalite killer raised in the teachings of this cult from birth. A top prospect in killing, you might say. So growing up, Sarevok was extremely violent and abusive with both Helena and Orin, as well as I assume the other relatives and Bhaal worshippers that were nearby. But still, both of these women loved, respected, and revered the Deathbringer greatly. I mean, think about it. This is a family, if we can even use that word, where violence, abuse, bloodlust, these are the core tenets of being. So a pretty messed up situation, especially for a kid to be growing up in. But you should keep in mind that Orin was raised completely unaware of her sort of inappropriate parentage. She was told from the earliest age that she was a proper Bhaal spawn, just like Sarevok was, and was very much drawn to the old prophecies and teachings of her so-called grandfather. Now, pausing for just a second, it's a pretty stark contrast from Ketheric Thorm's backstory, right? I mean, that was a family-loving man that built this beautiful life, but just kind of saw it fall apart piece by piece until he lost himself to grief. But yeah, here we have a character that seems to have been born and bred specifically for wrongdoing. And while I personally admit I enjoy antagonists more when they have an understandable downturn into evil along with motives that make sense to me, sometimes pure nasty ones like this are fun too. So, the Chosen 3. In the Ketheric video, we talked a fair amount about what that chosen title really means in the Forgotten Realms, and it's pretty much just a mortal champion chosen by a specific god. An individual that has proven themselves truly devout body and soul and are thus rewarded with great favor, and oftentimes great power as well. Think of it like the god's favorite worshipper to act as an arm of influence in the mortal plane. Well, when Orin was just a young girl, her mother Helena, a cold-blooded psychopath herself, desired more than anything to be bestowed this very honor. In fact, I would say she was obsessed with the idea. And as you can imagine, to become the chosen of an evil-aligned god like Bhaal, you need to do some monstrous things. Well, also around this time, Sarevok was kind of retired, I would say. Now, due to everything we discussed in the Villainpedia entry on him, he was actually technically no longer a Bhaal spawn anymore, but more of a, custodian, as he puts it, a mentor, an expert on all things Bhaal. Imagine that local dad with the hip problem who doesn't work much anymore, so he coaches Little League. Well, Helena at some point came to Sarevok and asked him what she had to do to win the Lord of Murder's ultimate favor, and Sarevok suggested something that was just unnaturally evil. Killing her own daughter, Orin, who was hardly 8 years old at the time. Now, Sarevok argued this would be the ultimate sign of true devotion, so Helena didn't hesitate. While her daughter was sleeping, she crept into the room and attempted to strangle the child to death, but Orin woke up and fought back. And beyond just fighting back, she grabbed a nearby blade and began to hack her mother to pieces, severing her hand and eventually killing her. This outcome apparently surprised Sarevok quite a bit, but Bhaal, always watching his subjects from the darkness, was deeply pleased. He presented himself to young Orin in this moment as she played idly with her dead mother's chopped off hand and declared her his favorite child. Bhaal then instructed Sarevok to look after Orin very closely as he saw high potential in her, and Sarevok followed that order to a T. Just absolutely brutal, and really only the beginning of a lifetime passionately devoted to Bhaal, to violence, and to the art form of murder. But you know what's really murder? When the first of the month rolls around and you get absolutely kidney-shotted by a mob of subscription services that you completely forgot about. Well, thanks to the sponsor of today's video, Rocket Money, you can start saving more and managing your money better right now. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that allows you to not only easily have a gander at all of your active subscriptions, but also lower your monthly bills, build custom budgets, and grow your savings all in one convenient place. Now, setting budgets is especially helpful for me, as Rocket Money analyzes your spending habits to create a realistic budget that works within your lifestyle, monitoring spending by category, and then giving you a nice little polite notification when you have exceeded your set limits. But my favorite feature of the Rocket Money app is Smart Savings, a way to automate just a little bit of money being moved into a savings account as frequently as you want, which is always a great way to start a little rainy day fun. So listen, man, stop getting your wallet bled dry. Take control of your finances today. Go to rocketmoney.com/ghostcharm right now to get started with a totally free trial. Click that link down below to support not only this channel, but also yourself. And now, right back to our lovely villain. So from here, you'd think this would play out pretty dang clearly. This character should have absolutely been set up to be this chosen of Bhaal in no time, and then the leader of this entire cult into the future. A weapon of this god as he plotted to take over the world time and time again, and this is absolutely what Orin herself expected. But sadly, for our villain, Bhaal, he had other plans. Because the Lord of Murder is a bit of an antsy fella, always looking for new toys, new subjects, new methods of spreading death and turmoil. But what he really desired was a true heir. Now, in the past, Sarevok and other Bhaal spawn had come close, but ultimately they all failed. Bhaal wanted an offspring made in his image completely without complication or dilution. So, in a bit of an experimental move, he did something completely unprecedented. Using only his own divine blood and his strange dark power, Bhaal carefully and meticulously figured a way to create life. And while all other Bhaal spawn would be mothered by mortal women, this one was designed by hand and created by some sort of parthenogenesis. We're talking about a being made of pure, unfiltered evil, and this is the character known in-game as the Dark Urge, often referred to as Dirge. And it is an origin that we can actually pick ourselves when we are creating our avatar at the very start. Now this character, boy, whew, this is a whole other barrel of worms, and I definitely think he deserves his very own video, so maybe that will happen someday. No promises. But this is by far the most interesting way to play Baldur's Gate 3, and in my eyes, the Dark Urge is the real protagonist of this game, and I think you're going to see why in just a second. Well, to put it simply, this child ended up being everything Bhaal expected him to be, and then some. Lethal, bloodthirsty, ruthlessly violent, efficient, and loyal. And as he and Orin grew up together in this cult, Dirge quickly established himself as the new favorite and eventually was dubbed the Chosen of Bhaal. He then traveled the entire world over for years, serving his father, murdering, assassinating, and generally just ending a life whenever he could in the name of his god. Orin had been entirely eclipsed by the Dark Urge, but I don't want you to get it twisted. She was doing practically the exact same things as she reached adulthood. I mean, she grew this reputation of being one of the most effective and dangerous assassins in the history of the realms. It's just that no matter how much she did, how much blood she spilled, she remained the obvious second choice. Now, I don't really think this needs to be said if you've played this game, but Orin the Red is crazy, insane, beyond unhinged and unpredictable. She is psychopathic. I mean, she literally ended up keeping her mother's corpse, stringing it up on the wall of her bedroom to play with and throw daggers at. This character is addicted to violence, to killing. She has no moral compass whatsoever, she has a very quick temper, and honestly, she doesn't really have many other interesting facets to her character. Now, I say all this because I think it's important to note that Orin and the Dark Urge, though they were very similar on paper and in some ways siblings, had very different styles when it came to killing. The Dark Urge did not care about methodology or technique. He knew only that every kill pleased his father greatly, so he would, in this way, kind of recklessly and mindlessly just obliterate his target one after another. But Orin, on the other hand, was very much into the whole dramatic, flamboyant, and artistic side of being a serial killer. Skinning her victims alive, playing with their blood, arranging the dead body in some sort of artisanal way. I mean, just look at her, dude. She created this beef jerky bikini thing out of the skin and bones of the dead. But the clash of these two types of insanity and approaches to their craft absolutely caused tension between these characters, and that's not even taking into account Orin's growing jealousy of the Chosen. But still, the Dark Urge carried on being just that. He commanded respect, not only from all the members of the cult, but from all those in shadowy corners of the world, and that eventually led him to meeting and befriending the third member of the Chosen Three, Lord Enver Gortash. These two characters became very, very good friends, as thick as thieves, and at some point started working together on something big, a plan that was far bigger than just Bhaal or any petty murder around the city of Baldur's Gate. Because just as Dirge was a chosen of an evil god, so too was Gortash. Bane the Tyrant, Lord of Hatred and Oppression, had hand-selected this smooth-talking human as he was quickly making his way up the food chain in Baldur's Gate with his cunning and charming demeanor. And these two would soon align themselves with one Ketheric Thorm, the chosen of Merkel, Lord of the Dead. So, if you watched the Ketheric or the Sarevok entries, you know how this works. Bhaal, Bane, and Merkel make up an infamous trio of in-game gods known as the Dead Three. Three gods of death that long ago were killed and destroyed themselves, now only shadows of their former divine selves. And just before the events of Baldur's Gate 3, these gods were cooking up their latest greatest plot to take over the world, kill a bunch of people, and gain untold amounts of power through three mortal champions. And that is, of course, the Chosen. So even though we as the players of this game typically recognize Orin as the chosen of Bhaal in that team, it was originally you, the Dark Urge, who played that role. And beyond just that, the Dark Urge was the one who really hatched so much of the whole absolute cult plot that we explored in the Ketheric video, which was genius. I mean, pretty much a religious hoax crafted to construct an army that would follow their every order. He is also the one who initially proposed subjugating the discovered Elder Brain under Moonrise Towers. He is the one that, along with Gortash, stormed the vaults of Hell and stole the crown of Karsus to control the brain, and he is the one who acted as the sort of leader of this group of villains. But Orin's jealousy quickly turned into a sour resentment, to hatred even. I mean, she was serving under the Dark Urge. She was taking his orders and doing his bidding, but she wanted what her brother had. So just as this trio successfully controlled the Elder Brain, Orin planned her attack. At some point, Orin ambushed the Dark Urge, driving her dagger deep into his skull, splitting his head wide open like a Halloween pumpkin as he crumpled to the floor. He lay there, twitching and bleeding, but barely alive, and Orin probably felt a rush unlike any other in her life. And this is the moment where things obviously diverge a little bit. So if you do not play as the Dark Urge, you select a different character or make a custom one, that's it for this guy. He bleeds out, dies in that moment, and you discover his corpse in-game when you're in the Bhaal Temple yourself. But if you do play as the Dark Urge, he obviously survives this encounter, but after sustaining such a terrible head injury in classic RPG form, he loses all memory of his identity and former life. And beyond just that, Orin infects him with the very first Absolute Cult tadpole in an effort to enslave him amongst the ranks of the mind-controlled Absolute Army and have him shipped off. Damn. I mean, just so evil, right? Honestly, this reminds me so much of the Sith from Star Wars. You know, a particular culture of evil where power just rules all else. So if you get got by someone below you, then, well, you got. You should have either been stronger and killed them, or you should have struck first at the subordinate that wanted your position. And that is exactly how Bhaal saw things as well. So this instantly elevated Orin in his eyes to being the finest of all his children after all, and she was quickly dubbed the new Chosen. All of the cult answered to her now, and she reveled in this grisly victory. But of course, this also meant that this whole existing plot involving the Dead Three, Ketheric, Gortash, the Brain, and taking over the world, well, they just lost one of their most important players, really one of their leaders. And just as that whole thing was kind of getting underway, Orin kind of awkwardly replaced the Dark Urge in the conference room here. Now, Ketheric, I think we can gather from their single interaction we get to observe before his death, he didn't really like working with Orin much. But Gortash, I'm sure, was conflicted as well. I mean, he and Dirge hatched this whole thing together initially, and I'm sure they were friends. But ultimately, I think Enver is like a super self-serving man that just kind of let the whole thing roll off his back, accepting this last-minute substitution and working with Orin while he had to. But oh Nelly, I just love, and I mean love, how the Dark Urge and Origin stories are so closely intertwined. The fact that if we want to, we can play as this brain-wiped former menace with zero knowledge of our past self, and then face this villain who betrayed us and learn of our true origin, and then almost like looking in a mirror see the type of person we used to be, it's just incredible. It reminds me so much of my favorite video game ever made, KOTOR 1, if you know, you know. But based on the type of character you are playing as with Dirge, you can either lean into that sense of lost destiny and want revenge, or you can reject the whole nasty ball thing and move your character in a direction of redemption and resistance. We'll talk a little bit more about this in a moment, but the Dark Urge storyline I think is my favorite thing about Baldur's Gate 3 period, and Orin just plays such an integral, evil-ass role in it. Now, in the Ketheric entry, I admit I was holding back quite a bit when it came to the actual plan of the main villains. Sure, we learned about the brain and the foe aspect of the Absolute toward the end of that video, but what are they actually attempting to do and how? So now, I want to just lay it out plainly for you to understand. Ketheric, as we covered, was to be stationed at his castle Moonrise Towers on the road between two big cities, Elturiel and Baldur's Gate. And here, he would amass innumerable followers of the Absolute. Ketheric would be seen as the chosen of this fake god, and then his army would follow his every command as they awaited orders to march on the city of Baldur's Gate. Then, meanwhile, the other two chosen would be stationed back in the city. Gortash had fancied himself into a political advisor with unmatched powers of manipulation and sleazing, and had really cozied himself up in recent years to the top crust of the city's leadership. I mean, the dukes, the nobility, etc., and established a reputation as someone strong, someone trustworthy, and someone that could protect the people of Baldur's Gate should anything, quote, bad ever happen. And meanwhile, from the disgusting underbelly of the city, Orin and her cult would strike fear into the hearts of the citizens, murdering people around the various districts, using her shape-shifting powers to instill terror in Baldurians and generally create a bit of controlled chaos. Now remember, these three were also able to capture Duke Ulder Ravengard, the leader of the Flaming Fist, which is a massive martial mercenary company that acts as the guards and defending forces of Baldur's Gate. So, when the time was right, this Absolute army would lay siege to an unsettled city, and Gortash would step forth as the savior, the only man strong enough to fight back the threats both in and outside the city walls. Now this is also very Star Wars-ish, right? Playing both sides of this conflict to kind of control the narrative, write their own heroes and villains, and eventually come to control the entire city. Then they plan to go about infecting more people with the Absolute parasites, growing their army, causing more death, and appeasing their respective gods as they conquer the world, and then the bad guys win. Now, I'm gonna be honest, it's not a bad plan, but perhaps it's not quite good enough, because each of these chosen three plotted in secret to betray the other two, because of course they did. Though I do wonder if the Dark Urge hadn't been replaced, if that would have been the case. Now, not to mention, there are powers much larger than these three bozos at work, but that's a story for another time. So that's the plan, but I would like to take a moment really quick to comment on Orin's physical appearance, and then by extension, her actual race. Now, obviously, she looks a little off, right? Gray with white eyes and this swirling sort of black texture under the surface of her skin, but otherwise she appears pretty human in general proportions. And then there is the power I just alluded to, literally shape-shifting and changing her entire appearance and voice very convincingly to mess with people and to get away with murder. Well, believe it or not, Orin doesn't really have an officially recognized race within Baldur's Gate 3. However, her complexion and ability very much align with that of a Changeling, a D&D race that are able to shift their skin around in guise as other people they have seen or interacted with. But Changelings have a very close association with another race here known as doppelgangers, a kind of more monstrous version of this archetype. Now, I mention this because Sarevok, during the events of the Iron Crisis in Baldur's Gate 1, worked very closely with countless doppelganger agents. It's a bit of a theme in that game's plot. So I personally find it very likely that Orin is part human, part doppelganger. Sarevok probably just got freaky with one of these agents way back in the day, had Helena, and well, we know the rest. But I think from the outside looking in, with everything we have just learned about this character, don't you think her role in things is a little bit, lame? Now, I don't mean this as a critique of the writing necessarily, but more so in the way she just kind of stole the Dark Urge's spot at the finish line, and then her only real job is to kill people and attempt to work well with others, something that she proves to be not very good at ultimately. But alas, that is her role, and it's one that she plays in a very impactful way. I mean, she holds one of the Netherstone that controls the brain, she's in charge of the Bhaal cult under Baldur's Gate, and she is actively murdering many innocent people by the time the player reaches Act 3. So now, we gotta get to the good stuff. How do we encounter Orin the Red in-game, and what are we going to do to stop this villain? So the first time in-game we see anything about Orin is way back in Act 1 when the Absolute invades our brain and gives us this image of the Chosen Three. And then, at the very end of Act 2, we get our formal introduction to this character right before Ketheric bites the dust, and shortly after you claim Thorm's Netherstone, your party departs now the healed Shadowcurse lands and heads straight for the city. Because remember, things here are very urgent. The Absolute army is marching on Baldur's Gate right now, and you've got to beat them there. But the good news is, by claiming one of these 3 stones that control the brain, you have put quite the hang-up in your enemy's plans. And right as Act 3 is beginning, we get to watch a fascinating little cutscene.
Sergeant, if you are here, I presume Wern's Rock is secure, and preparations for my inauguration are complete.
No, Lord Gortash. We were interrupted. Another quake in the lower city. More severe this time.
So you came cowering to my chambers? I'm flattered, Sergeant. But even I cannot command natural phenomena to cease.
Forgive me, my lord, but there is panic in the streets. The people are afraid.
Perhaps the people would be calm if you kept your nerve. I expect better from the Flaming Fist than to run scared from a slight tremor in the earth. Get back to your duties.
Duties, duties, duties. Patrolling and saluting and following and bowing and scraping. Yes, sir. No, sir. Rip and cut your throat, sir.
Your plan is falling apart, lordling. Give me a reason not to cut you to ribbons.
Control yourself, Orin. We need to focus on reuniting the stones or the brain will break free. These quakes are just the start. Neither of us expected the Prism Bearers to kill Ketheric. They'll be traveling to the city. Let's make sure we give them a Baldurian welcome.
I itch to peel you, to split your skin, to see your skull shine in the light. Little tyrant. Lucky for you, I harvested a whole family of living flesh in Rivington at high sun. They will sate my blade thirst tonight. Oh, but tomorrow, and tomorrow, and tomorrow, and tomorrow, my blades will thirst again.
So damn, I mean, we see that shape-shifting power on full display right here, able to trick even her co-worker, Gortash, completely, and I mean the dialogue Orin has is just nasty violent stuff, isn't it? Huge shout out to actress Maggie Robertson who voices Orin, just incredible skin-crawling work by her. I think she also did a sensational job in Resident Evil Village. Maggie, we will be watching your career with great interest. But interesting to see how these two seem to be getting very, very sick of each other, and I bet Gortash is desperately missing his old pal the Dark Urge right about now. Honestly though, I love this scene. I think it gives us 2 very key narrative elements that are going to be extrapolated on in the coming act, the disharmony between these characters and the wavering control they have over the Elder Brain. I mean, there are earthquakes happening, that can't be good, and Lord only knows how powerful and angry that brain would be if it were to break free. I also really love when video games are able to create a sense of legitimate urgency around its antagonists. I mean, these guys need to find you ASAP and you want to find them ASAP. These stones are at play, and of course, you as the main character want to decide the fate of the realms for yourself. But the quirks of these characters and the different brands of evil on display, it all makes for a very interesting game of cat and mouse toward the end of this game, to say the very least. Well, as Act 3 begins, you aren't plopped down on Broadway, but rather begin this kind of slow approach to the city, starting in this somewhat rural southern district known as Rivington. There are tons of little storylines to pick up, characters to meet, and things to do and discover as you make your way toward the city proper. But this is also where you start to notice some of these earthquakes yourself. Very, very strange. But perhaps most importantly, it is right here in Rivington, for the first time all game, possibly 110 hours in, that you have the opportunity to interact directly with Orin the Red, out in the open, though you will not know it is her at first. Yes, there are 5 potential characters that Orin will disguise herself as in this area. A blacksmith, a flaming fist soldier, a journalist, a woman at the Circus of the Last Days, and a ruffian who is dying on the beach of a stab wound. While each of these scenes vary a little bit, they are all very cool. A sort of casual conversation that slowly turns a bit off color and odd until suddenly it becomes very violent and Orin reveals herself to you.
Hail, friend! Fine day, isn't it? It's a fine city, isn't it? No better place to hail from. Used to be you'd arrive knowing you'd a full belly and a warm bed waiting for you. Not anymore. These days, there's barely enough to go around. Add the refugees on top and well, folk aren't feeling too generous. Some well-to-dos in the city donated enough to see the newcomers right for the time being. Only they didn't bother helping everyone else. Locals going without while strangers feast. It stoked the fire, all right. Some Baldurians are kicking up a fuss round the front of the barn as we speak. If I wasn't wearing this uniform, I'd walk round there and teach them a lesson they'd never forget. Those refugees have been leeching on our city for too long. If we don't show them that we mean business, they'll bleed us dry. We need to march round the front and kill every last one of them. Let's see them eat our food with their guts on the floor. What do you say? Why does it matter? Innocence makes the blood run clearer.
So, you're the lick-spittle who crushed the Bone Lord's thrall. Have you come begging, sniffing for our stones? Gortash won't like that. A throat his black hand can't choke the spit from. You'll need to bleed and carve this city if you want to turn him to grave meat. He shivers at the thought. When you find the Lordling, tell him Orin is watching.
Now this right here is that exact feeling of fear I was talking about in the opening of this video. I mean, the uncanny valley, the suspicion that you are interacting with something that isn't quite human but very, very dangerous. This type of antagonist, a chameleon that could be anywhere, be anyone, being shown to you in this way, this is not a character that is afraid of or intimidated by you or your power. No, she is a hunter. You are her prey, and she has been watching every single move you make. It's pretty chilling stuff if it works for you, and you just kind of have to log this experience away, because from this moment, Act 3 really opens up. I mean, a silly amount of quests and characters and branching options and loose ends to wrap up. Remember, this game is goofy massive with tons to distract and entertain you, but it legitimately feels like right when the threat of Orin breathing down your neck has kind of subsided, she decides to pay you another surprise sinister visit, along with plenty of doppelganger agents just like Saravok used, being sent after you to trick and attack the party. Orin is rather openly taunting you. She is keeping you on that leash of fear, urging you to come and find her, cross blades, and let the strongest win. Now, of course, it is a slightly different story if you are playing as the Dark Urge. In that case, she has so much more fun with you, hinting at your old identity and challenging you more on the grounds of finding out who is Bhaal's favorite child after all. Very good stuff. Well, as you make your way toward the core of the city, you will inevitably come across a place called Worm's Rock Fortress. And if you decide to stop in here and explore around, you will encounter a bit of an event taking place, an important one. It is a coronation, a ceremony anointing Enver Gortash as the first ever Archduke in the history of the city, a position that will grant him total and complete control over all of Baldur's Gate. Now, we're going to go over this and then some when we tackle Gortash in his video, but let's just say, this villain strikes a much different chord. a more personable approach when he meets you and your party. I mean, instead of trying to murder you, he just wants to talk, to persuade you to work with him. And again, this is even spicier if you are playing as the Dark Urge because you've been reunited after all this time. But the bottom line is Gortash is over Orin. She's insane, too hard to work with, and her usefulness has run out, so he gives you the option of going and killing her, grabbing the stone and bringing both of them to him, and then ruling the world together. Now, if his word is any good, I guess we'll find out in his video. But he also offers you some information. He says if you want to find Orin, simply follow the murders in the city, and also tells us that Orin has already infiltrated our camp, and unfortunately, he is telling the truth. Because the second you enter this fort, Orin makes a sinister move off screen, kidnapping one of your party members and replacing them herself, though you will not know who it is at first. Now, I love event design like this in games, so here's how it works. Basically, there are 5 possible characters that can be taken by Orin: Lysel, Halsin, Gale, Minthara, and then this child that you meet in Rivington named Yenna. But they are prioritized by Orin in that exact order. But the character has to be in your camp, not in your active party, and they cannot be a character that you are currently romancing. But each of these characters have a very unique scene when you long rest and then confront them over their strange behavior until Orin decides to reveal herself yet again. But man, this is like a full-on display of the talent level of the voice actors of Baldur's Gate 3, because these versions of the characters sound enough like the person to be convincing, but still just barely off that you know something is up. The little kid Yenna's scene is particularly off-putting for me because she offers you this kebab with meat from her pet cat on it. Ugh. But this ultimately is where Orin offers you her very own deal.
Look at it, crawling and sniffing and rooting around in the filth. Is it my netherstone you seek, little piggy? Or did the child's little pet leave you no appetite for the main course? Do you not savor the slaughter of such innocence? I will not slice. Her kind die too easily. The Murder Lord demands a better offering. Something new, sticky, sweet, and delicious. He wants you. Kethric's killer turned the corpse lover to carrion when you took his stone. Oh, but he was a dull kill. No blood to spill, no guts to rip. A desiccated husk, all dust and hollow. You must be sharpened before you set your edge against my skin. Against the tyrant's throat, of course.
You heard Gortash's whispers. I see how your skull swarms with his promises. He whinges and wails over the crown of Karsus, wanting to command it without me. Oh, how I long to slit his poxy smile from ear to ear. But I can't touch him. He bound my blade when we first conspired. Gortash didn't want me at first. Didn't trust me. Got me to wag my tongue, swear an oath never to hang him from the hooks. Drip drain him into father's open jaws. You must kill the tyrant. Take the netherstone from his corpse and bring it to my temple.
There we slice and shred each other. The survivor claims the stones. What's left of the other is Bhaal's. Agree, and I will bring my assassins to heal. They watch you always, longing to spray the crimson from your veins. Refuse me, and you'll learn what happens to those who defy Bhaal's doctrine. So will your friend.
So pretty cool that the final 2 chosen are openly trying to recruit you to kill the other. One is offering cooperation, and the other a fair fight to the death. If you ask me, the only proper thing to do is to kill them both, baby. But for me, it always felt right to get Orin's stone first, and assuming that path, you have to go play detective. So, the murders. Well, upon investigating them for yourself, you learn that not all the people that have been taken out were killed by Orin necessarily, but aspirants as well as doppelgangers. And following this plotline further leads you eventually to come upon a bloodstained piece of paper that's pretty much a hit list, including the next living targets to be taken out. Now, of course, this is an RPG, so you can either go and help those people and prevent the murders from happening, or you can kill them all yourself. But regardless, you will very likely next come to a place called Candle Hollow's Tombstones in the graveyard of the lower city, and here, a secret door can be found that leads you into an area known as the Murder Tribunal. Now, the Murder Tribunal is where we finally get to meet Sarevok and Chev in Baldur's Gate 3 alongside these bloody figments of other characters of Baldur's Gate games gone by. And if you watched my Sarevok video, you already know I find this whole thing to be pretty damn stupid. I mean, his physical inclusion in this game just baffles me and does not hit at all. I mean, it disregards this extremely popular storyline offered in Baldur's Gate 2 around the character, but I'm done complaining, I digress. Sarevok is here to act as a kind of filter, the thing standing between you and Orin that also spouts a lot of the information on our villain that we covered earlier in this video. But within the game, he is here to see who's worthy of joining the cult. So, of course, there are many ways you can go about doing this as well. If you're evil, you can play their little ball game, meet their requirements, and be accepted legitimately into their ranks, or you can just murder all of these people and force your way to the next section of the narrative, which is what I like to do. Totally up to you. But there are loads of different interesting dialogue branches with Sarevok, I have to admit, especially as the Dark Urge, so I think it's worth exploring these moments for yourself. I'm usually just showing you one, maybe two paths. Well, by killing Sarevok or by other means, you are able to eventually find, down in the sewer system beneath Baldur's Gate, the entrance to the Bhaal Temple, and the way to open it with a special little Bhaal-themed necklace. So damn, I mean, here we are, and I think this is one of the coolest looking areas in the entire game. I wish I could time travel and show it to the average Baldur's Gate 1 enjoyer back in 1999, their mind would be blown. So after some combat sections, fighting your way through these blood-misted caves, you eventually come to this antechamber, where inside, you seem to have found the heart of the cult, Orin the Red, and whoever your captured friend is lying there on a stone slab knocked out. I'm gonna let Orin speak for herself here.
Hush, hush. I hear footsteps, trapping on the murder lord's stones. It lied to me. It lets the tyrant live and comes crawling into Bhaal's sanctum instead. I know what you did. Spilled my grandfather's crimson. He was mine. He showed me how to slice and slit. He guides my dagger still. Oh, did it think it could protect? Did it think it could save? Only the blades can offer salvation. You do not lie, underling. It is your blood I am destined to spill. Your death spit will stain these walls, little lamb. Oh, your murder should have been exquisite. A crypt-born effigy to greet Bhaal's bleeding dawn. And now it will be nothing. Come to me, Father. Set my flesh to your unholy purpose.
So, there are a multitude of different little details here that can come up in conversation. Like you just heard, she will notice if you killed Sarevok, and this interaction also varies depending on if you have actually killed Gortash before coming here or not. Now, if you didn't, you can try to lie, of course, but Orin isn't really one for conversation. And as I have said all video long, this meeting carries a much more climactic tone if you are playing as the Dark Urge, because this is when you really get the full lore load, so to speak. She even shapeshifts into you and tells you how she stabbed you in the head in your voice. Incredible stuff.
How you screamed as my knife slit your skull. Your brain juices, sticky and sweet. A little hole, big enough for the worm. Your body, a blood sack to feed it. The favorite of Bhaal turned meat puppet. strung up by the sinews and plucked by my hands.
This is the truth you had forgotten. You were the favorite, the chosen.
And as Dirge, this is also one of the big moments where you're choosing to either embrace or resist your Bhaal inner self. Now, in some ways, this feels like the end of the game for this character. But I would say one of my favorite things about this interaction in general is if you have used the Speak with the Dead spell on Orin's deceased mother, or you really chatted up Sarevok before coming here, you can actually tell Orin that her mother attempted to murder her on Sarevok's suggestion. Or you can tell her she is the product of this incest, and let me tell you, she's not ready for this information whatsoever.
No! He didn't! Filthy, pig-mouthed little liar! Grandfather loved me. He worshipped me. These petty smearings will not save you. Liar! Your skin will be Grandfather's shroud, coward! I will flay you where you stand!
This really rattles her bones, and she completely loses focus on that little ritual she's got set up with your party member and just turns into the Slayer, a very unique power that all Bhaal spawn are granted, where they get to kind of anamorph into this grotesque beast of pure murder. But if before then you pass a few persuasion checks, it goes even further, and Orin is so freaked out that Bhaal himself has to step in and force Orin into that form. There are a few other variations of things here, but I think you get the gist and the vibe of this moment. Blood must be spilled now. No more talking, and someone is walking out of this room with 2 nether stones. Well, this boss battle is kind of like Ketheric's before her, one of my favorites in the entire game. As she is likely starting off in her Slayer form, Orin gets this insane stacked buff called Unstoppable, where she cannot be moved and takes only a single point of damage per hit 7 times per round. Now this obviously makes her very hard to deal direct damage too, and these stacks are maintained by the kind of chanting cultists around the outside of the room. If you start to mess with them, it causes even more chaos to manage. Not to mention, Bhaal's big ass head back there casts a spell every round on a party member that forces them to kill someone within the circle by the end of that combat round, or they drop dead themselves. So it's very frantic, hard to deal with, stressful fight that is best dealt with by churning those stacks down on Orin with as many little attacks as possible, and then just chugging her down before things get messy. But hey, whatever works for you. Now again, it's also worth mentioning that as the Dark Urge, this fight can instead turn into a true Bhaal duel. I mean, like a mock Garah, a cage fight between the 2 possible chosen with no interference, and that is very damn cool as well. But eventually, after whichever grind you choose to endure, Orin very unceremoniously falls, melting to the ground, reduced to a pool of blood and bones. On her body, you can find her lobster suit, her weapons, and of course, her ever-important netherstone sitting there in the dagger just for you. Nearby, you can then find Orin's chambers, with the potential of seeing the murdered dirge on the ground. You can visit Orin's dear mother pinned to the wall, and you can quickly see that with 2 of the 3 netherstones now in your hands, the Elder Brain is kicking and screaming to the point of breaking free. Well, from here, there's little else to do now but to get back up to the surface, regroup, and decide the fate of the final chosen. Now, maybe you watching this right now happen to love Orin the Red as a villain, and if you do, more power to you, man. But if you feel like something is sort of missing, let me tell you, you are not alone. Now, on paper, this character should be great. I mean, her physical design is incredible. She's extremely evil. She's very well acted, has an interesting backstory, an intimidating presence, and a very memorable final boss fight. So then what's the problem? Well, in my opinion, Baldur's Gate 3 boasts a roster of some extremely nuanced and layered characters, and that is especially true when it comes to the pretty large handful of villains on tap. I mean, there are some very believable characters in this game that have understandable wants and needs, if it's stuff coming from their personal past, the past of their entire race, their instincts as otherworldly beings, or just what they legitimately think is best for them and the realm. Nearly all of the villains in this game can be intimately explored through conversation, at times through debate and persuasion. I mean, you get to know just how complex the world of Faerun can be, and how you as the main character are getting to steer the future of this land in huge ways. But kind of in the middle of all of that is Orin the Red, A somewhat immovably insane, murdering antagonist with very little else to say to you other than like, I'm gonna rip out your spine and make a guitar with it, you know? I mean, her brand of evil, while it definitely has its place in Baldur's Gate 3, just fails to reach the heights of her peers, and ultimately, it feels a little bit boring. Now, I also think it's very important to note, especially when comparing her to someone like Ketheric, that Act 3 of this game had some obvious rush development when the game was initially released. I mean, Act 2 is, chef's kiss, man. It's so succinct, it's so well paced narratively and clear in what it is trying to do. But I don't think there's a single person out there that would disagree when I say getting to the city kind of makes it feel like that sharp direction falls apart quite a bit. And Orin feels like one of the fatalities of that decay of structure, in my opinion. I mean, her own quest feels a bit odd pacing-wise, and almost as if you missed the reason why she's as important as she seems to be and why she's so angry. Orin seems like a bad guy that would have worked a lot better in an older video game, even something like Baldur's Gate 1 or a similar title, but here, she feels a bit like a missed opportunity. Now, I would have loved to see a way to keep her intact as this insane, murderous character, but allow for evil playthroughs to work more closely alongside her to topple Gortash. Maybe even recruitable as a temporary companion that you lose control of at times during combat because she's so crazy. I just wanted some way to get into her head more of what she wants and why. Or maybe it's as simple as giving us more to dig into with her backstory and a method of pushing that moment of hysteria when you tell her about Sarevok even further. I mean, I wanted to see so badly Orin be this deeply broken person, being used by the gods from birth just like Ketheric was. I think we almost get a hint of that depth, but it's just not enough for me. I mean, let's be honest. She seems like she's here to act as the principal antagonist for the Dark Urge and his quest to figure out who he is, which I guess makes sense, and it works very, very well for that, but the fact of the matter is a majority of people playing this game for the first time are creating a custom avatar. They aren't getting that story fed to them, and thus, it's just a bit of a mess. Now listen, all of my narrative gripes aside, I would still say that I enjoy this villain, quite a bit even. And it all comes down to that feeling of fear that we have been talking about. I mean, her appearance, her powers, the unpredictable nature of how and when she's going to appear during your first blind playthrough, it's very unique stuff, mechanically speaking, and I love when an antagonist legitimately puts you on your toes. I think it's very difficult to pull something like that off, especially in a CRPG with this much content. In a game full of so many all-time great characters, you simply cannot deny that this is one of the most memorable of the bunch. A psychopathic changeling born and bred to kill that viewed herself as the Lord of Murder's plan perfected. A villain of simple means and goals that ultimately proved she cannot be reasoned with, cannot be bargained with, and cannot be trusted. A villain that killed her own mother, assassinated her own brother, and strived to see the entire world bathed in blood. A fitting end for a character that embodied all of the chaos, the madness, and the violence of the Lord of Murder. Thank you guys so much for watching and listening to the very end of this video. Orin really is a fun villain, and it's a shame she and her storyline didn't have a little more time in the oven to bake and become something more interesting, but hey, it is what it is. Now remember, just like with Ketheric, that Baldur's Gate 3 is a huge game. There are so many little dialogue quirks and things to be discovered. I encourage you to play this puppy yourself and see firsthand all these characters have to offer. Shout out once again to my beautiful patrons. That is all for today. So, go play some games, everyone. Be kind to one another, be kind to yourself, and I will see you very soon in the next video. Until next time, peace.